It's fall. Do you rearrange your studio colors like your wardrobe colors? I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. I'm Lynda Norman. I'm a watercolor artist in the beautiful province of British Columbia. Today we're exploring some warmer colors for fall. It's a cool fall day here. I'm feeling nice and cozy in my studio. Lorenz has got the camera set up, and we've been talking about what fall makes us feel like. How do we approach these cooler days, and what does that mean to us? And I, of course, always think in terms of color, and my wardrobe does change a little bit. I bring on the heavier long sleeves, and the colors in my palette change a little bit. In terms of how I use them, I think, more than anything. My standard colors are there. I love the rich fall, earthy tones, and I just adjust them with a little bit more brightness, maybe a little more whiteness for the spring and summer seasons, maybe add a bit of gouache or something to make things pop a bit. So fall is really one of my favorite themes to paint, because it just, oozes from my palette. The colors that I've chosen sort of lend themselves to those rich, warm, earthy colors, and also to the grayer days. Sometimes, as it is today, pretty stormy out there and pretty gray. So, my Payne's gray, my Mayan dark blue, those are the colors that really lend themselves to those moody fall and winter skies, whereas the other brighter colors help to perk things up a little bit. I sit in our yard and look at the beautiful changing colors, and the oranges and the reds and the purples and the various shades of green, and some colors that I don't even know how to describe sometimes. And when I'm mixing pigment on my paper, as I normally do, sometimes those colors magically appear, and I'm pretty thankful for that. My Daniel Smith paints very seldom will let me down when it comes to that. So today I'm going to paint something that will fit into behind this little mat. The mat is 10 by 12. The opening is 7.5 by 10.5. And so I've got my beautiful Saunders Waterford St. Cuthbert's Mill 100% cotton paper. It's white natural, and it's called fine grain, but it is cold pressed. So I'm just going to take that out. It was a block, but it's sort of come apart. I'm manhandling it a bit, but I did want you to see that logo and everything on the paper. It's quite lovely. It's what I use in some of my classes, and students get to experience the beauty of a nice 100% cotton paper that's it's not the least expensive on the market, but it's affordable and very well worth it. So I've taped off so that when I have my design finished, it will fit nicely into the mat, and I'm not going to run off the edge with parts of the design that I might not want to sacrifice. And as I said, I've been looking in quite detail the colors and the shapes and how things are coming together, and the changing of things, and the gradient colors that sort of come magically when fall is here. So I'm going to paint just a quick landscape, I think, today. And we'll start with just some dark, moody skies, I think, just because that's the mood that today's weather is bringing us. And I did start it as a landscape position, so we'll continue with that. And so I'm going to bring my sky quite well. Actually, I'll wet the whole page. That makes it so much easier. And I see there's a little hair on it. Brushes do tend to lose a hair once in a while. At the wet water stage, I don't mind picking off the hairs. Once I've got paint on my page, although it's tempting to pick it off then, sometimes it's better to wait till it dries. So I'm just going to let that water soak in a tiny bit. And of course, while that's happening, I will wet my palette. I have both my solo palette, eco palettes out today. Some of the colors are similar from one palette to the next, but we have some others, other colors that that I like to bring in. So this was a set of colors recommended by Michael Soloviev when I took a workshop with him a few years ago, and it has a Quinacridone deep gold. And typically, as you know, my Quinacridone gold is one of my go-to colors. So the deep gold just gives us another level. I just put my arm in that. That was lovely. So I've got a deeper gold. I've got some sienna in there and some different purples and some neutral tint. And moon glow is in both of them. And I think that's probably the only color, perhaps, that I have similar. This one has a couple of phthalo in it. I probably wouldn't use the phthalo colors for fall. They're a bit bright for my taste, but you never know. They could, when mixed with other colors on your page, could really. Sometimes they give a beautiful, deep shaded tone for underneath bushes and trees. So the page has sort of buckled and warped a little bit, but I don't have a ton of water on there. It's not pooling, so I'm not going to worry much about that. And I think let's try. Well, there's a lunar blue. Let's try a little bit of that. Very, very little on my brush. I just want the slightest bit. These skies are pretty. When it's overcast, they're pretty nondescript, really. And we'll just put a bit of color on, just a hint. We'll let some of that white look a little bit more on the gray side. And today, when I looked out, there's really not even billowy storm clouds. It's just kind of gray and damp and overcast. So I think I'm just going to leave that background the way it is. That's going to give me that sense of a little bit of rain and mist perhaps in the background. But fall colors, if you ever notice when it's a day like this, and if the sun does come out, it's like a beacon, and it just, when it hits the leaves that are changing, they start to glow, and it's really quite beautiful. So I'm going to take just the very, very tip of my solo brush, and it's still got a bit of the lunar blue on it. I'm not going to even rinse it off, but I'm just going to touch it into that deep gold, Quinacridone deep gold. And with the lightest touch, I'm barely going to put any, well, I'm not going to put any pressure on. I am just going to drag my brush across my page from side to side. Remember, you don't want to start your brush in the middle of any painting, typically, because you'll get that brush mark, and that sometimes can't be removed. So I just want a bit of the sun to come in. I think I'll bring it in from this side. And I'm just going to feather that in, just so it looks like we've got a bit of sunlight coming through this way, so then my trees on this side maybe will have a bit of that glow if it's coming in that way. All right, we'll carry that right down just to take the paint off the brush. And now I'm going to switch, and I'm going to go to my, well, I could either use my 3-line solo brush or my Hake brush. Okay, I think I will use the Hake brush because it does have that nice end on it that can scruffle out and get more paint on my page. So I've wet it. I've smooshed it down on my paper towel. That's another very technical term, by the way, smush. It goes along with spurtle and a few other words that we've come up with. And yeah, I think we're going to go with some of the darker greens. So my Undersea green, of course, is my go-to. I love that that green, it's got more of the yellow and the earthy tones in it, whereas some of the other greens, the sap green and the others are a bit brighter. But I'm going to start my basis with, actually no, I'm not. I'm going to go in with, I'm going to go back to the Lunar Blue, just because that's something we've already got on our page. And the reason I'm going in with this, I just tapped it twice on my palette into the paint that's sort of juicy and woken up. Got a little bit on my brush, and I'm just going to start small, and I'm going to lay in some tree shapes that will become sort of the background shadows for these trees that are happening here. And it might be nice to have a little bit of a pathway or a walkway. Maybe because the sun's coming from this way, we'll keep that going that direction. And then maybe over here we'll just have one dab into the paint. We don't want a whole lot. Better to start light, and then you can always go back in again and do more. And we'll just bring a little bit of that here. So our pathway is going to come this way. It's got a bit of the yellow Quinacridone gold coming through. I'm just going to encourage that, and I'm going to go back with my larger solo brush, just damp, like it's not leaving much more than just a wisp of water on my hand. And I'm just going to smooth those colors across just slightly, just to give that walkway a bit of grounding. Okay, we'll go and smooth those. We'll smooth that horizon line and straighten it out a little bit later. It's kind of a challenge sometimes when the paper is a bit buckled. But let's work with that. So I've got the blue in the background. I use this, as I said, the same blue as I did in the sky, just to sort of tie that all together. And these are just background shapes, shadows, the underlying parts of some of the bushes. And while my page is still quite damp, I will rinse my brush, dab it off to dry it. I don't really want to be adding a lot of moisture to my page at this point in time, because if I do, it's going to be a different level of moisture than what's on the page, and things are going to start to bloom and blossom. So 2 little dabs into my Undersea green, and we'll just go right over top of some of these blue pieces and a little, extra here and there. Turn your brush. We don't really want to be creating a polka dot pattern, but we do want to get some of these colors happening in the background here. And one more dab just to get a bit of depth. These green portions will be the next level close to you. The blue portions have settled into the background, and that's sort of where they'll stay for that undergrowth, under the branches shadowing. And we'll maybe just put a couple of things falling out into the pathway, tiny bit. We can add some rocks and things down there later. Now, because I've got the deep Quinacridone Deep Gold just slightly in my sky, I'm going to do the same thing with my Hake brush, clean it, scruffle the end. It's just barely damp. You can feel it's a bit cool. And I can see where my paints are just needing a bit more moisture to wake them up. I want to add enough moisture so that the palette isn't swimming, but the paints are looking like they're glistening. There's a little bit of water sitting around, which helps sometimes with the thicker paints. But at this point in time, I really just want to be picking up thick, rich pigment. So if you were to use it on for example, a brush like this, and you were picking it up, you would pick it up and it would be a very thick, sort of like heavy cream. It won't be dripping off, it won't be wet. wet enough that it's falling off your brush. And one dab. This is a very strong color. Your Quinacridone golds and deep golds and some of your oranges and other yellows can be very, very strong and overtake. So if I've got sun coming in this way, I might just want to put a little bit more of the gold showing through on this side and perhaps just on the tops of some of this. This will be perhaps behind that bushy area and not quite so so prominent. And maybe a little bit here as it comes through the pathway. Okay, and just a little bit on the top where these little pieces are coming up into the sky area. Now to brighten things, as I said, sap green is a good brighter green. And if we put that sort of on the side here that is closest to the angle of the sun that's coming through. And again, just a dab. If your paints are wet enough in the palette so that the paint is awake, it's active, you can pick it up with your, with the tap of your brush. That's all you need. And we'll just get a little bit of brighter greens happening there. We don't want a lot because those brighter greens are kind of disappearing, aren't they? And then just for good measure, because I'm noticing there's some beautiful, I don't even know, like I said, how to describe some of these colors. They're roses and purples and the beautiful blend of those colors. And I don't even, like I said, I don't even know how to describe it. So I've got an alizarin crimson that I think might work, and I'm just going to give it another wee squirt. Now these are my accent colors, the crimson and the gold. So this is just going to just the occasional tree. Not every tree is going to be changing colors at the same level, at the same rate. So we'll just, this is a palette, this palette on my left is one that I haven't activated for a little bit, so it needs a little extra encouragement. But the alizarin crimson mixed in with a little bit of that gold, and it doesn't take much, just the hint here and there of a little bit of those colors. You can always put a bit more in one area just to brighten things up a little bit. I'm going to go in now with my Lebenson medium goat hair synthetic blend. This is my little workhorse. It's got a point on it that is just exquisite, and it will allow me to sort of define some areas. And as I say, the paper is still damp, and I haven't added a lot of water to the paper with the pigment, but it's managed, this is a good paper. It's managed to stay fairly damp. If it was any wetter, these lines that I'm putting in would be even more diffused. And often you want to wait until your paper is fairly dry before you start putting your tree shapes in. But I kind of want these to be a little bit muted in the background. And then we'll go back in afterwards and maybe put in a few more that are a little bit brighter and more specific. But we just wanted to get some shapes in here. And I'm using an Undersea green, and I'm just sort of giving under the bushes at the ground level here. A bit of definition. What's in front looks almost like leaves that have fallen on the ground. And I kind of like that. And as you can see, I'm not going in and making specific shapes. I'm just adding the color here and there, a little bit jigged and jogged. And I won't add any more colors to this painting. That's, I think that's enough with what we've got. Now I have a damp paper towel in my hand, and I'm just going to go in now and just take out some of those so that they have a little bit more organic shape to them. And I maybe will do the same on this side, just to give some, just a little bit of underpinning, undershading for some of these. And as the paint dries and continues to diffuse, we will have that, the colors will soften and lighten. And then on this side, because this is front and center and closer, I'm going to be a little more specific perhaps, because it's a part of the painting that's closer to you, and you can add more detail there. So again, fairly thick, rich paint, and with the tip of the brush, just flicking it up into the page. Fairly thick, rich paint on the tip. And you can make your grasses and shrubbery shapes if you want. And if you blend them into a bit of, sort of like a little mound of grass and things coming up here. And I would, I think, finish this off with, just to anchor the front of the page rather, a little bit, I would just continue this around a little bit. And you can have this come in front of some of the other area that's got a nice bit of pale color on it. These little brushes are just so amazing, because you can just create lovely little branch shapes. Oops, had way too much water on it. And that's what happens when you have too much water on your brush. It wants to spread out and move along. I think I'm just going to have to let that part of the page dry a tiny bit. I don't want these to be too thick. There we go. It's coming a little better now. Just making sure I've got enough of the right level of water and pigment on my brush. Okay. This just joining some of the colors that are here. And again, don't be afraid to dab out and change the shape of things just by pulling out a tiny bit of paint. Sometimes, as I say, it's what you take away that makes all the difference, right? And on my edges, I like to just flick a little bit of paint up so that it looks like there's a little bit of shrubbery and grasses happening. And then with the side of my brush, with just what's left on the bristles, with that undersea green, And I will just very lightly scumble across. This part of the page is, it's still dampish. You can feel that it's, you know, cool to the touch, but it's definitely not as wet as it was. And just by using the side of the brush, you give that that little bit of texture. And I need to remember to bring this to the edge so that I don't have a lot of white space coming through on the side when I get that matte on there. And then we'll just as it dries, you can go in also with a stiffer little brush and pull out some color. But right now I'm just putting in just a few little tree trunk shapes. And the lightest touch, I'm barely touching the paper with this brush, and you can see how much paint the belly of this little brush holds. And yeah, it's giving me the opportunity to just keep going and flicking through some of these shapes, causing branches to appear. And especially here where it's a bit drier, you can see where they are a little more defined. And I'm still using just the the Undersea green for these branches. Certainly you could go in with your Lunar blue, the same blue that you used for your background and in your sky. I wouldn't necessarily want to try it with another color. I wouldn't want to introduce another color into this at the moment. And just a bit more dark on this side. The sun, remember, is coming from here, so we'll take out a tiny bit here, make it a little bit brighter, and then as we go further back, we'll just add a bit more dark. I love that the way these colors diffused in this corner with that Lunar blue and the Undersea green and a little bit of the gold. And it's like the sun is sort of filtering through some of these bushes. You could certainly go in and add a few more defining leaves. Let's see if this is wet enough. Yeah, it feels pretty nice. Well, there's even, what is this? This is Quinacridone orange. And you could certainly just add just a tiny bit of that if you needed to brighten up a few more spots. But plain and simple, nice little fall scene. You could certainly, with the side of your brush, and maybe with some of that Quinacridone gold. I just want to make sure that the brush is quite dry. I barely want to have paint on my brush, but I want the sides to be a bit scruffed out. And I'm going to try this. We'll see how this works. So barely touching, just skimming the surface with a little bit. You probably can't even see that, but it is attaching itself to the very surface bumps of this paper. If it was a rougher paper, you would see more of this texture happening. But again, I'm not putting any pressure on my brush. I'm just using the lightest stroke possible. And I have a tiny drop of water on my table there. I'm just going to use that. I'm not going to dip the whole brush into the palette. And again, we'll just get this walkway with a bit of color so that it doesn't look like it's just part of the sky falling down in between the trees. Okay. So the pigment that I've put on is fairly thick and rich. I can still go in and work with that with just water. So I've rinsed my brush, dried most of it off, and if I touch where some of those bits of color just hit with my brush, then I can actually start pulling a little bit of that color out of those very light spots and just making them a little bit uneven and adding just a bit more texture to this walkway. And if we pull it out from this side will be in shadow because the light is coming from this direction. So we'll just enhance this side a tiny bit. And I see I pulled out some green there, which is just fine. We'll just work with that. Again, the side of the brush, barely damp, just the lightest touch, and encourage that pigment just to come out. It's very subtle, very subtle. I try to keep, and I have to turn this a bit, I think. I wanted to keep the lines horizontal as possible. That's a struggle. It always is a struggle to keeping those lines as straight as possible. You can add interest by moving up and down this way, but you want the main lines to be fairly straight. And that gives you a bit of texture to your walkway, a little bit of interest. And I think, other than perhaps just a little bit of, maybe with the green, enhancing some of these little edges here, a tiny bit with a bit more dark color, I would call this one, as a little fall study, done. Probably the only other things would be maybe to, once it's dry, once things have quit being buckled and puffed, I could go in and straighten. But because this color here is sitting on the surface, I haven't worked it into the page, it's sitting on the surface. It's there and it's ready. And if I just went back in once the page is flat with some water and a better eye, and I could straighten those areas out quite easily. All right. So fall colors. Right now, a little bit light coming through, a little bit of pinks and golds, some greens obviously still. Because I went lightly with my hockey brush, you can see here there's lighter areas, and you could even tap out more with your paper towel. That gives a sense of light coming through those trees. And you have a sweet little fall scene. We'll do another one maybe down the road a little bit with some more intense colors, some stronger golds and oranges. But for now, I think I'm happy with this little guy, and have some fun, play around, get your fall colors moving around, and see, there's some wet stuff there. Use your paper towel, your damp paper towel, your favorite colors and your favorite brushes, and sort of settle into the mood of fall. I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. We had some fun with some fall colors. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel or head on over to their members area.